So now that we finished the rules and exponents, we're going to go ahead and move on to kind of start going over some review stuff for pre-cal for next year. So rational expression, we have an algebraic fraction such that the numerator and the denominator are polynomials. So when you're simplifying these rational expressions, make sure that you're following these steps. You're going to have to factor anything that can be factored. If it cannot be factored, that's fine. You would just move on to the next step. So it says simplify the monomial, using the exponent rules. Eliminate anything that they have in common for the binomial factors, which we'll do some examples if this is not making any sense, and then write what's left, and then that would be your answer. So for example, if you look at 12y, I'm just looking at 12y right here. I cannot factor anything from 12y because it's a monomial. It's by itself, okay? There's no 12y plus 4 and then I can factor out a 4. So you have to leave that alone. Same thing with the 48y cubed. There's nothing for me to factor. It's just one monomial, okay? So in order for me to be able to factor something, I need at least two. So at least a binomial. But what I can do is the 12 and the 48, you can simplify those, okay? So I can go ahead and reduce that fraction. I'm going to be left with 1 at the top, because 12 divided by 12 is 1, and then 48 divided by 12 is going to give me 4. Now you have y divided by y cubed. Now, if you remember here, this is your quotient rule, okay? So you're going to have your, whichever one is bigger, or if you want to use a negative rule, I'm going to stick to the quotient rule. Because the cubed is bigger, that means it's going to be at the bottom. So that means we have the 3 minus that 1, because there's a 1 there. So that means my final answer is going to be 1 over 4y to the second power, because I have to subtract them. And that would be your answer for number 1. So you'd get 1 over 4y squared. So now let's go ahead and look at I'm going to do 4. So same thing with 16 and 36. Or sorry, let's look at the first one. This right here, this is a monomial. It's just 1, okay? The reason I know it's just 1 is because there is no plus, there is no minus there. So that means it's just one term. I want to check if I can simplify these. So if you look at this one, you could actually simplify the 16 and the 36. If you divide both top and bottom by 4, you're going to be left with, let me change the color. You're going to be left with 4 over 9 if I simplify those. Now the the x cubed, y cubed at the top, and then the x to the 5th, y to the 2nd. Again, because this is division, you're using the quotient again, the quotient rule, which means you're subtracting. Now if I look here, x to the 5th power, that's bigger than 3, so that means my x is going to stay at the bottom. So I'm going to do 5 minus 3. And I'm showing you all the steps so you guys can see later on. I'm not going to do this many. And then the y to the 3rd power and to the 2nd power, it's bigger at the top. So I'm going to do y to the 3rd power minus 2. And then I'm going to go ahead and simplify this one. So it's going to give me 4y over 9x to the 2nd power. And then you would be done. Okay, so it's kind of bringing everything that we did from your exponent rules that we have been working with on last week and the week before that. I will give you the answers to these because these are new. However, I need you to show your work because I am giving you the answers. So even if you are doing this mentally, I need something that will show me that you did show some type of work and it's not just I'm copying Miss Rodriguez's answers. So let's move on to the next one. So I'm giving you these answers. Okay. Now let's go on to these. Now remember, when you have a monomial, you can never factor. So the ones that we did before here on the last page, these are all monomials. Okay, so you're not going to be able to factor anything. Now if you look at 7 through 10, we have some binomials going on here. So n plus 6, because this is one term and then that's a second term, you have a binomial. Now if I look here, there is nothing I can factor. The n plus 6, I can't do anything there. But if you look here, you can factor something. You have a GCF. So I'm going to rewrite this as n plus 6 because it stays the same. And I'm actually going to factor a 3 here, which will give me 3 times n plus 6. Notice how this is the same thing. You can cancel these out. But before you do that, remember, there's a 1 here technically, which means that your final answer here is 1/3. Now don't get a mistake over here on number 8, because that's a plus, that's a minus. So there, you can't cancel these out. However, we can try and see if we can factor something out. So if I look up here, again, I have a binomial, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and factor out a 4. I'm left with x minus 1. And then again, I'm going to factor out a 4. I'm left with x plus 1. Now I cannot cancel the x minus 1 and the x plus 1. However, the 4's do cancel, which means that your final answer is x minus 1, x plus 1. Okay? So you would just do it that way. And then for number 9, I'm going to give you a quick hint. You can use your perfect squares here. The y squared is a perfect square. This is a minus, and that's a 64. So you would be able to factor this one. So factor it. You can't factor the y plus 8 here. And then you're going to be able to cancel something out here. Okay? Go ahead and finish those. I'm going to go to the next ones. Again, I need you to show your work. Otherwise, it does not count. No credit. Sorry. All right. So number 11. Again, you can factor this. Okay. This is a trinomial. This is your ax squared plus bx plus c format. You can factor this. You're going to look at your a. If your a is equal to 1, greater than 1, or less than 1, you're going to have to fix it if it's less or greater. But because this one here, this a here is a 1, then you're good. You're going to go ahead and multiply that. Remember, we had our chart where we had negative 18. What times what gives me negative 18, but it also gives me a negative 7. So you have to determine what that answer is going to be. Okay, so you're going to have to go ahead and figure out which two factors go there, which is going to give you 2 times 9, but it's going to be a negative 9 because I need a negative 7 and I need a negative 18. So now at the top here, I'm going to have x plus 2, x minus 9. Whoops, not x. This is k. So k plus 2 and k minus 9. And then k minus 9, I can't factor this here, so I have to leave it alone. But if you look here, these cancel out, so you're left with just k plus 2 as your final answer. So this is kind of some intro to some pre-cal stuff that's going to help you when you're moving on with that. Okay, so I'm not going to do that many examples, only because, again, all you're doing is factoring, guys. And I give you nice factoring trinomials, because look, all of these a's here, the a value, these are all 1, and that's ideal. Okay, so I'll get you started on the next one. You can't factor n plus 6. However, these two, you will be able to factor something out, and you will cancel something out as well. Okay, so I'm going to give you the answer to these. Okay. Again, you need to show your work. So all of these, I'm giving you the answers. So these are all of your note sections. I'll do an example here. I'm going to go ahead and go over probably number 20, or let me look back. Yeah, I'm going to go, so these A's are simple. But when you get to these other problems, they're going to get a little bit more complicated. So this is where I'm going to jump back in and help you guys. So for number 19, I'm going to factor this, okay? So I can factor out an 8x squared. I'm going to be left with an x plus a 1 here. Now at the bottom, I can factor out a 10x, and then I'm going to be left with x plus 1. So now if you notice this, you can cancel out your x plus 1s, which will give you 8x squared over 10x. However, the 8 and the 10, that one simplifies as well. So I'm going to divide this one by 2 so I can simplify. I'm going to be left with 4 over 5. And now this x squared and this x, these are being divided. That means you're going to have to do quotient rule here, which means you're going to subtract. So it's going to be at the top. So your final answer is 4x over 5 for that one. And then for number 20, it looks a little bit complicated, but it actually, you can factor something out of it. So notice how your a here is greater than 1. That's fine, because if you look here, you can factor out a 5, which will give you y squared plus 2y minus 8 all over. You can factor out a 10 here, which makes the a turn into a 1, so that's what you want. Y squared minus 3y plus 2. So this is where you would then try and factor these out. So you're going to get negative 8 for this one. So you want to know what times what gives you negative 8, but also a positive 2. So you're going to end up being negative 2 times 4. Okay, so 5x minus 2, x plus 4, because remember you want a positive 2 there. And then let's look at the bottom. So you have y times 2. What times what gives you a 2, but also a negative 3? 2 and 1, but they both have to be negative in order for you to get that negative 3. And then x minus 2, x minus 1. Now if you look closely, these cancel out. These do not cancel out, but they do simplify. Okay, so your final answer here would be x plus 4. I don't need the parentheses. So x plus 4 all over. And then we're going to get 2x minus 1. Okay, the 2 is coming from here, the 10 divided by 5. So again, you have the answers here. And then I don't know if I put x instead of y. These should have been y. Sorry, it's the same answer. I just put the wrong variable, but it's the same thing. All right. And you should be able to do these as well, because I did give you the answer. The only thing I'll do is, again, on 23, just kind of start you off. You can factor out a2. You're left with b squared plus 6b plus, we're left with 9 here. So you're 9. And then the bottom, you're going to factor out a 3. So b squared minus b minus 12. Okay, you're not done. You have to factor out it even further. And if you need to simplify the numbers, quotient rule, or anything else, okay? Eventually this will be your answer, but again, I need to see your work. All right, and that's the end of it, I believe. Yeah, because then that's your homework.